Jake walked through the bustling streets of the city, his heart heavy with the weight of a challenging week at college. Tall buildings and the night lights created an urban atmosphere around him. He decided to stop at a small cafe by the roadside, seeking a moment of tranquility amidst the city's chaos. Upon entering, the aroma of fresh coffee and the soft sound of ambient music surrounded him. He ordered a coffee and chose an isolated table near the window. As he stirred the sugar in his coffee, his gaze met that of a young woman sitting across the cafe. Her shining red hair caught the soft light, and her blue eyes seemed to capture the candlelight on the table. Jake felt a shiver of inexplicable recognition. He had never seen her before, but something in her expression made him feel like he had known her for years. She smiled shyly when she noticed him looking. He returned the smile, surprised by the sense of familiarity her presence brought him. Their eye contact was brief but enough for Jake to feel like the world around him was fading away, leaving only him and that girl in that cozy cafe. Intrigued and curious, he wondered what destiny had in store for this unexpected encounter. Jake stared at his father's watch with a mix of fascination and curiosity. It was an old object, with marks of time engraved on its polished metal. He wore it every day, a physical link to a man he never knew. Emily watched discreetly from afar, her thoughts diving into recent memories. She had seen that watch before, but not in Jake's hands. It was at Charlie's house, a man tormented by life and addiction, whose obsession with that watch was notorious among the rehab clinic staff. Charlie spoke of the watch as if it were a lucky charm, an anchor to a past he seemed desperate to reclaim. Emily remembered the stories he told, the moments of clarity when he clung to the watch as his only connection to a son he could never explain abandoning. Now, seeing Jake with the same watch, Emily wondered about the paths life drew, uniting unknown stories of people who never imagined their destinies would cross. The watch, a symbol of intertwined past and present, seemed to hold more secrets to reveal than she could have ever imagined. Jake and Emily continued to meet at the cafe, developing a natural friendship as they shared stories from their lives. Emily still wondered about the watch but didn't want to seem intrusive. One day, as they talked about their passions and dreams, Emily casually mentioned her work at the rehabilitation clinic. She spoke about the challenges and the touching stories she witnessed daily. Curious, Jake asked about one of the toughest cases she had faced. Emily hesitated for a moment but decided to share about Charlie, a man whose recovery journey was marked by his obsession with an old watch. As Emily described the watch in detail, Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. Every word from Emily echoed like a distant echo in his mind. The watch she described was the same one he wore every day, the one that had belonged to the father he never knew. Emily noticed the change in Jake's expression and asked if something was wrong. Jake, struggling to find words, finally revealed that the watch belonged to his biological father, a man he never met but whom Emily had cared for at the clinic. Silence hung between them for a moment, laden with unspoken meanings and overflowing emotions. For Emily, meeting Jake gained a new layer of complexity. For Jake, the world seemed to shrink, revealing an unexpected path of lost connections and intertwined stories. Jake and Emily continued their conversation at the cafe, but now there was a new tension in the air. Jake was eager to learn more about Charlie and the watch he held so dear. Emily took a deep breath, recalling the turbulent days at the rehabilitation clinic. She shared how Charlie, a man with a gentle smile but tired eyes, always carried an old pocket watch with him. It was an object he treasured as if it were his most valuable possession, the only link to a past he rarely mentioned. In moments of clarity, Charlie spoke of his son, a baby he never had the chance to meet. He revealed fragments of a life marked by difficult choices and deep regrets. Emily listened intently, knowing that the watch symbolized much more than just time. For Jake, each of Emily's words was like a puzzle piece slowly falling into place. He realized that the watch was not just a physical object but a bridge between him and an absent father, whose memories lay hidden in the shadows of the past. As Emily finished her story, Jake felt a mix of emotions flooding his chest. The watch's story was now his story too, a journey to uncover the truth behind the decisions that shaped his life in ways he could never have imagined. Jake and Emily found a quiet spot in the park, away from the curious eyes of the city. The wind whispered through the trees as they sat side by side, facing truths that echoed through their minds. Emily took a deep breath, looking into Jake's eyes with a mix of compassion and apprehension. She knew the words she was about to share could forever change how he saw the world. Carefully, Emily began to recount the story of the man she had cared for at the rehabilitation clinic, a man whose life was intertwined with Jake's in ways he could never have predicted. She described how Charlie, his biological father, battled his inner demons while carrying the weight of a watch that represented everything he had lost. Jake listened in silence, his heart tightening with each word that fell like stones upon his understanding of the past. The image he had of his biological father, an absent and unknown figure, was beginning to transform before his eyes. Emily continued, revealing the painful circumstances that led Charlie to leave newborn Jake on someone's doorstep after the traumatic death of his mother. Each detail was a sharp knife piercing his soul, but Jake knew he needed to hear it all, even if it meant facing the hardest truth of his life. By the end, the silence between them was palpable. Jake tried to process the painful revelations that had shifted his perception of himself and his origins. He realized that the journey to understand who he truly was had only just begun, and the answers he sought were intertwined with his father's emotional scars and the unexpected support of Emily. As Jake navigated the turbulent waves of his emotions, he found comfort in the loving arms of Martha, his adoptive mother. She was a gentle woman with a welcoming smile that calmed the storms within him. Martha had always been there, for as long as Jake could remember. She found him on her doorstep, a baby wrapped in mysteries that she embraced without hesitation. Raising him was her mission, and she did it with all the love and dedication of a true mother. Over the years, Martha built a life alongside Jake, teaching him with patience and kindness the meaning of love and family. She was his safe harbor, the anchor that held him steady in the toughest times. When Jake turned 18, Martha decided it was time to reveal the truth about his origins. With the watch in hand, she gently explained the story of his birth, the tragic circumstances that brought him to her, and the biological father he never knew. Jake listened to every word with a mix of gratitude and sadness. He knew Martha loved him as if he were her own son, but now he carried not only his father's watch, but also the weight of untold stories and the choices that shaped his destiny. Martha continued to support him unconditionally, her unwavering love a beacon of hope amid the storms that ravaged his life. To Jake, she was more than an adoptive mother. She was the embodiment of unconditional love that would guide him on his journey to discover who he truly was. Jake sat in his room, holding the yellowed envelope in his trembling hands. It was the letter Martha had given him along with his father's watch, containing words he both feared and longed to read. Carefully, Jake opened the envelope and unfolded the aged paper. Martha's words flowed like a gentle stream, revealing the secrets she had guarded so carefully for so long. She began by recounting the day she found him, a baby abandoned on her doorstep. Martha described the instant love she felt for him, her determination to provide him with a life full of love and opportunities. Jake felt a lump in his throat as he read about the mother he never knew, whose life was tragically taken at the moment of his birth. Martha shared her own struggles in raising Jake, the sleepless nights, the shared smiles, and the silent tears. When Martha reached the crux of the letter, she wrote about the watch, an object she always knew would one day belong to Jake. She explained how the watch was linked to his biological father, a man tormented by his own demons and the difficult choices he made. Jake read each word with a mix of indescribable emotions. He finally understood the complexity of his story, the connection between the watch in his hands and the intertwined lives he was only beginning to comprehend. As he finished the letter, Jake felt a deep sense of gratitude and sadness. He knew that despite everything, Martha loved him as her own son, and this letter was her way of ensuring he knew his true origins and could face the future with the clarity she never had. Jake felt his heart race as the taxi approached the rehabilitation clinic. He was about to confront his biological father for the first time, a man whose presence had always been a distant shadow in his life. Emily was by his side, holding his hand with the silent support he desperately needed. The clinic's gray building loomed ahead of them, its austere exterior contrasting with the turmoil of emotions Jake felt inside. They entered the reception and were guided to Charlie's room. Jake paused at the door, taking a deep breath to gather courage. He saw his biological father lying in bed, frail and aged, yet his eyes still held a glimmer of recognition when they saw Jake for the first time. The silence between them was heavy with years of unasked questions and unshared truths. Charlie tried to speak, but the words came out as weak whispers, his lips forming names that Jake could barely understand. Emily gently intervened, translating Charlie's words for Jake. She revealed that Charlie often spoke about the watch, the same one Jake now held in his hands. She explained how that object had been an anchor for Charlie, a symbol of a past he could never fully unravel. Jake sat beside Charlie, holding his hand gently. The tears he had held back for so long began to flow freely. He saw his biological father not as a stranger, but as a man marked by life, by difficult choices, and by profound regret. In the hours that followed, Jake and Charlie shared precious moments of conversation and silence. They found a mutual understanding that transcended words, a connection that began to heal the wounds of the past and pave the way for an uncertain but potential-filled future. As he left the clinic that day, Jake carried with him not only his father's watch, but also the peace of knowing he had finally found a crucial piece of his emotional puzzle. Meeting his biological father marked the beginning of a journey of self-discovery and forgiveness, guided by love and the courage to confront the past. Jake and Emily walked together through the city streets, their steps synchronized as if they were following an invisible path of mutual understanding. Jake's encounter with his biological father had left deep marks, but Emily was there to help him navigate the turbulent waters of his emotions. They talked about everything and nothing at the same time, sharing gentle laughs and moments of comfortable silence. Emily, with her kindness and understanding, was a constant beacon of support for Jake, helping him find clarity where there was confusion and hope where there was despair. In the days that followed, Jake found in Emily not just a friend, but a confidant. She listened to his most intimate concerns, his doubts about the future, and his reflections on the past. And when words failed them, their exchanged glances were enough to convey comfort and solidarity. Emily shared her own stories as well, revealing parts of her life that had shaped who she was. She talked about her own challenges and achievements, showing Jake that everyone has their internal battles and their hopes intertwined with others. As time passed, Jake began to realize that his journey was not just about finding answers or reconciling the past, but also about accepting the complexity of life and the unpredictable connections it brings. With Emily by his side, Jake learned to trust again, not only in others but also in himself. He discovered that true support comes not only from people who share his story, but from those who walk beside him, offering unconditional love and acceptance. And so, as the sun set over the city, Jake felt grateful to have found Emily along his path. She had not only helped him find peace and clarity, but also taught him a valuable lesson about the power of empathy and true friendship. Jake was tense, waiting outside the house where Charlie had spent the last few years of his life. He knew this moment was inevitable but no less painful. His relationship with his biological father had evolved since their first meeting at the rehabilitation clinic, but there was still a crucial piece missing in Jake's emotional puzzle. Entering the house, he was greeted by visible reminders of a life full of ups and downs. Framed photographs on the wall captured moments of joy and sadness that Charlie had experienced over the years. Jake felt the weight of untold stories hanging in the air. Charlie sat in the living room, his eyes meeting Jake's with a mix of gratitude and regret. Words between them were few, but feelings ran deep. Jake expressed his own hurts and uncertainties, speaking of the impact of growing up without a father, of unanswered questions that haunted him. Charlie listened attentively, his face marked by life showing signs of profound sadness. He shared his own internal struggles, moments of weakness, and regrets that led him to choices he couldn't undo. The heavy silence between them was interrupted only by the sound of broken hearts trying to reconnect. Through the emotional confrontation, Jake and Charlie discovered that the pain of the past could not be erased, but it could be understood and accepted. They acknowledged the complexity of their individual stories and the impact these stories had on each other. As the sun set and the conversation quieted, Jake and Charlie found a place of mutual understanding. They couldn't change the past, but they could choose forgiveness and reconciliation in the present. The emotional confrontation became a turning point in Jake's journey, allowing him to release the burden of resentment and embrace true connection with his biological father. Jake stood before his father, now frail and pale in the clinic bed. The sorrows of the past hung heavy in the air, but his father's weary gaze revealed a mix of regret and hope. Emily stood beside Jake, holding his hand firmly, silently conveying her support. "Jake!" His father's voice came out hoarse and hesitant. "I shouldn't have. I failed you in every imaginable way." Jake felt a lump in his throat, struggling to contain the emotions welling up inside him. "Dad!" His voice faltered for a moment. "I grew up without you, without knowing who you were." Jake's father closed his eyes briefly, as if taking in his words with pain. "I was lost, son. I lost myself so much that I couldn't be there for you when you needed me the most." Silence hung between them, laden with years of unexpressed pain. Emily squeezed Jake's hand tighter, encouraging him to continue. I don't know if I can forgive," Jake murmured, fighting back tears threatening to fall. "But I want to. I want to try." His father opened his eyes again, now moist with tears. "I didn't expect you to forgive me, Jake. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything." A moment of vulnerability united the three in that hospital room. Words were no longer necessary. Forgiveness began to unfold in the expressions on their faces, in the gazes that met with mutual understanding. Jake felt a weight lifting off his shoulders, a burden he had carried for so long. Looking at his father, he saw not just a man who had faltered, but someone who had also suffered and struggled with his own demons. Finally, in a hesitant gesture, Jake reached out his hand and his father grasped it. It wasn't complete and instant forgiveness, but it was the beginning of something new between them, a path to redemption and the rebuilding of a long-lost bond. Jake and Emily left the clinic in silence, lost in their own thoughts. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, as if the world was in harmony with the serenity they felt after Jake's emotional encounter with his father. They walked side by side, their steps slow and measured, while the wind whispered gently through the trees around them. Emily looked at Jake, seeing in him a mix of emotions he was trying to process. "How are you feeling?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. Jake sighed, looking out at the horizon. "It's strange, Em. Part of me is still trying to make sense of all this. I never expected to feel what I felt today." Emily nodded, understanding. "You were incredibly brave, Jake. Confronting your father like that. It's not something many could do." "I couldn't have done it without you here," Jake admitted, looking at her gratefully. "Thank you for coming with me, even with your own fears." Emily smiled tenderly. "You don't need to thank me. Being by your side is what matters to me." They continued walking, absorbing the weight and lightness of the moment simultaneously. For Jake, it was as if a chapter of his life had closed, allowing him to look towards the future with more clarity. They reached a bench under a leafy tree and sat down together, sharing the comfortable silence. The old watch on Jake's wrist seemed more than just an object now. It was a link to his past, but also a reminder of forgiveness and the opportunity to move forward. "Sometimes, life surprises us in ways we could never expect," Jake finally said, breaking the silence once more. Emily nodded, looking at him fondly. "And sometimes, you have to confront the past to truly live in the present." They hugged gently, sharing a moment of peace and reflection. In Jake's heart, there was a sense of acceptance and a renewed determination to embrace his future with courage and understanding. As the sun slowly set on the horizon, they remained there, together, united by the bond they had shared throughout this emotional and transformative journey. The return home brought a sense of renewal for Jake. He looked around the place he had always called home, but it now felt different. More welcoming, more familiar. Martha welcomed him with open arms, sensing the subtle change in his demeanor. She embraced Jake tenderly, knowing something significant had happened during his absence. "I'm glad you're back, dear," Martha said softly, gently stroking Jake's face. Jake smiled, feeling deep gratitude for her. "Thank you, Martha, for everything." That night, while reading the letter Martha had given him years ago, Jake felt a renewed connection to his story. Martha's words, written with love and care, recounted the journey he had been on so far, from the moment she embraced him as her own son to the day he decided to seek out his past. Emily was also by his side, offering support and understanding. Together, they talked about what the future held, eager to face the challenges that lay ahead, but confident they were in this journey together. "It's like a part of me finally fits," Jake shared with Emily, looking at the old watch in his hand. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I'm ready to face it." Emily smiled, intertwining her fingers with Jake's. "And I'll be by your side, Jake, always." And so, with the past reconciled and the uncertain future stretching out before them, Jake and Emily embraced the promise of a fresh start. The old watch continued to tick away, reminding them that every second was an opportunity to live fully, with forgiveness, love, and hope. As the night turned into a new dawn, Jake felt renewed and strengthened by the journey he had taken. With Emily by his side and Martha in his heart, he knew he was exactly where he needed to be, ready to write the next chapter of his life. The sun gently shone over the park where Jake and Emily walked hand in hand. The lush green of the trees contrasted with the clear blue sky, creating a serene and welcoming backdrop for the new beginning they were about to face together. "It's so good to be here with you," Jake said, looking at Emily with a loving smile. Emily smiled back, her eyes reflecting the sunlight. "I feel the same way, Jake. Every day with you is a blessing." As they walked, they shared their dreams and hopes for the future. Jake talked about his plans to explore more about his family roots, now with a fresh perspective and understanding. Emily expressed her desire to continue supporting Jake on his journey, while also pursuing her own personal and professional goals. "I know there will be challenges," Jake said thoughtfully, "but now I feel like I can face them, knowing I have you by my side." Emily nodded, gently squeezing his hand. "Together we are stronger, Jake. And whatever the future brings, we'll be ready to face it together." They stopped near a tranquil lake, watching the clouds' reflections in the water's mirror surface. The old watch on Jake's wrist continued to tick softly, marking the rhythm of passing time. "I love you, Emily," Jake said, his eyes meeting hers sincerely. Emily smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. "I love you too, Jake, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for us." And so, with hearts full of love and hope, Jake and Emily moved forward, ready to face the future side by side. Each step was a testament to the deep bond they shared and the promise of a bright future built on the solid foundation of forgiveness, redemption, and true love. As the sun slowly set on the horizon, they continued walking together, leaving behind the painful past and embracing the present and future with courage and gratitude. Click on the videos that are being recommended to you now.